Hello and welcome to Written Words. I'm Helen and today's video is another one in our series of More Than a Book Review, in which I take a look at books about the written word. And today's book is Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson, which, according to the tagline, is the story of the English language. So, as the tagline suggests, it tells the story of the English language. It starts with the origins of human language in general, explaining how human beings evolved and how our apparatus for speaking evolved to help us develop language. Then it explores how the English language evolved, and it goes on to look at different aspects of the language and its usage. So there are chapters on the history of the language, there are chapters covering pronunciation, spelling, regional variants, names, wordplay, and all sorts of other things as well. And it's written in Bill Bryson's usual casual, chatty, and easy to understand style. So you don't have to be an expert linguist to understand what he's talking about. The book contains all sorts of interesting nuggets about the English language, with all its oddities and quirks. And clearly a lot of research has gone into it. And the bibliography at the end of the book has some interesting recommendations too, if you're interested in exploring the subject further. It's also a very useful book for material to impress friends at dinner parties, if that is your thing. Bill Bryson is originally from the US, but according to the biography at the beginning of the book, he has lived most of his adult life in the UK. And he's written books about both countries and more besides. So presumably his experience of living on both sides of the Atlantic has given him a useful insight into the similarities and the differences of the way that English is used in the US and the UK. So let's take a look at just a handful of those fascinating nuggets of information. The average English speaker, confronted with agglomerations of letters like TCHST, STHM, and TCHPH, would naturally conclude that they were pretty well unpronounceable. Yet we use them every day in the words matchstick, asthma, and catchphrase. The Anglo-Saxons were also pagan, a fact quaintly preserved in the names of 4 of our weekdays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which respectively commemorate the gods Tu, Woden, Thor, and Woden's wife, Frey. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, to complete the picture, take their names from Saturn, the Sun, and the Moon. More than 1,400 place names in northern England are of Scandinavian origin. For almost every word, we have a multiplicity of synonyms. Something is not just big, it is large, immense, vast, capacious, bulky, massive, whopping. No other language has so many words all saying the same thing. Many words are made up by writers. According to apparently careful calculations, Shakespeare used 17,677 words in his writings, of which at least 1/10 had never been used before. So that's just a very small sample of some of the very interesting facts and figures that he presents in this book. Mother Tongue was first published in 1990, so it's been around for a while, although it is still relevant today. However, to a 21st century reader, there is a significant gap in its contents, because it was written in the pre-internet era. If a new edition were to be brought out now, it would do well to include an extra chapter at the end looking at the impact of the internet on the English language, which is by no means a small subject. The internet and technology have had a profound effect on society as well as on the way we use language, and especially the English language. So any book written about the English language today ought to acknowledge that in some way. But this book was effectively written a whole generation ago, and of course, much has changed in that time. So now let's take a closer look at a short passage from the book. The passage I've chosen is from the beginning of chapter 7, Varieties of English, and it looks at different regional variations in the language. No place in the English-speaking world is more breathtakingly replete with dialects than Great Britain. According to Robert Claiborne, there are no less than 13 quite distinct dialects in Britain. Mario Pei puts the number of dialects at 42, 9 in Scotland, 3 in Ireland, and 30 in England and Wales, but even that is probably an underestimate. If we define dialect as a way of speaking that fixes a person geographically, then it is scarcely an exaggeration to say that in Britain there are as many dialects as there are hills and valleys. In the 6 northernmost counties of England alone, 17 separate pronunciations just for the word house have been recorded. What Bill Bryson is saying in this extract definitely confirms what people often say about the difference between English in the UK and the US. It is said that if you get in your car and drive in the US, after a couple of hours you will still be in the same state where you started. But if you drive for a couple of hours in the UK, the local accent will have changed 3 or 4 times, as will the name of bread rolls. There are most certainly a lot of regional accents and dialects within the UK, not to mention a selection of different languages too. And if you're interested in this subject, I occasionally make videos in my regional English series where I look at how English is used in different places. So there are some links below to some of those videos. The extract refers to 2 works, one by Robert Claiborne and one by Mario Pei, and he lists those in the bibliography at the end of the book. Robert Claiborne's book is Our Marvellous Native Tongue, The Life and Times of the English Language, and Mario Pei's book is The Story of Language. So Bill Bryson claims that in Britain there are as many dialects as there are hills and valleys, which is possibly a slight exaggeration, but then he does give some concrete information, saying that in the 6 northernmost counties of England alone, 17 separate pronunciations of the word house have been recorded. Over the years, the division of counties in England has moved around somewhat, but out of curiosity I took a look at a map to see what exactly those counties would be now. So what are the 6 northernmost counties that he's referring to? Probably he's referring to Northumberland, Durham, Tyne and Wear, Cumbria, Yorkshire and Lancashire, although Yorkshire is also divided into north, south, east and west. Going back to the fact that this book was written in 1990 and the way that language changes, I'm not sure how accurate this would be now. It would make a very interesting study. In the past, for example in Yorkshire where I grew up, there was a very clear distinction between the accents in particular areas of that region. So there was a distinct difference between the way people spoke in West Yorkshire and in South Yorkshire. And even within West Yorkshire, there was a difference between the way people spoke in, say, Bradford and Bingley. However, Language is not something static, it changes, and people now move around a lot more and they mix a lot more, and so the distinctions between these regional variations has become more blurred, and gradually certainly the Yorkshire accent has begun to merge into just one generic version of Yorkshire, possibly with the exception of East Yorkshire, where there are still some very distinct differences. And the same is, of course, true all over the UK. People are moving around, people are mixing more, and the differences between accents and dialects has become more blurred. One interesting resource for anybody interested in listening to the way people's spoken language has changed over the years is the British Library's Sound Archive. They have a huge archive of sound recordings from all around the UK from different periods. So if that interests you, do take a look at that. I have added a link to that on the worksheet as well. So this extract is talking specifically about dialect, not language, but dialect. So what exactly is dialect? That makes a very good subject for our language focus. I decided to look up the definitions of language and dialect to see what the difference was. And while I was doing that, I also started to wonder, what about things like pidgin or Creole, which are a similar kind of phenomenon? So here are the definitions according to the Oxford Dictionary. A language is the method of human communication, either spoken or written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. And it's also the system of communication used by a particular community or country. A dialect is a form of a language which is used in a specific region or by a specific social group. A Creole is a language formed from a combination of a European language and another language, especially an African language. And a pidgin is a simplified form of a language with elements taken from local languages used for communication between people not sharing a language. So Creole and pidgin perhaps we'll revisit in a subsequent lesson, but let's focus now on language and dialect. If a language is a system of communication used by a particular community or country, and a dialect is a form of language used in a specific region or a specific social group, the boundaries between the two are very grey. Sometimes it's obvious what a language is. English, is it a dialect or a language? It's a language. And sometimes it's obvious what a dialect is. Yorkshire dialect is still English. It's still recognisable as English, but it includes certain words or phrases or pronunciations that are used in a particular place. However, it does become much more blurred in some other cases. For example, Scots. Scots is spoken in Scotland. English is spoken in Scotland. And Scotland also has its own language, Scottish Gaelic. But is Scots a dialect or a language? That can cause a huge amount of debate in certain circles, and it matters a lot to people whose identity is connected with that. And now for our writing prompt. Where do you live? How do people speak in the place where you live? Does everyone speak the same language? And do they speak it in the same way, with the same accent and the same dialect? Or is there a local dialect or even a mixture of local dialects? Bearing all of that in mind, try writing a paragraph describing the language in your area and how it is used, as if it's a continuation of the extract that we've just read, as if it's the next paragraph in the book which is focusing in on your particular area. As always, The worksheets that accompany these video lessons can be downloaded in packs of 10 lessons from the Written Words website at writtenwords.uk. Also, if you enjoy the writing prompts in these videos, you may be interested in my book, A Month of Writing Ideas, which gives you a writing prompt for every day of a month, with some examples from classic literature as well. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and in the meantime, happy writing!